afternoon. It's wonderful to see all of you here today. We have great speakers lined up, and I'm so grateful that public officials have come here today too. We know they have a very difficult job, but they're willing to give us some tips today on how we can do a better job advocating. You know, for years, conservation groups have been educating individuals on what they can do by themselves as far as recycling and conserving and polluting less, creating biodiversity in their own backyards. But we know that's not enough. We need government action too. The Lake County Conservation Council loves hosting educational events, but this is our first workshop where we all put on our thinking caps and share ideas on how to be more effective advocates. We're facing population growth, climate change, tremendous pressure from developers and mining companies and other businesses. So we need to be better advocates. So please read the scenarios on the back of your program. Is there anyone here who didn't pick up a program? Okay, good, great. So you can pick whatever scenario is most interesting to you, and then that's the group you'll join later on this morning. I want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Lake County, their nickname UU, which is a lot easier to say. I want to thank them for providing this great space and also providing many volunteers, all free of charge. Their only request is that I invite you to make a small donation, if you so choose, in the box just outside the doors back here. I hope you notice that this building is powered by solar energy. So way to go, UU. Today, Susan Fetter is going to be creating a list of laws and regulations that hinder environmental advocacy, and then she'll share that list at the end of the program. So if you think of anything, please let her know. And Susan, you've got the difficult task of keeping us on schedule. Thank you. Let's get started.
All right. So our first speaker today is Dr. Beverly Ward. Beverly has a PhD in anthropology and is a former University of South Florida faculty member. Currently, she serves as the field secretary for Earth Care at the Southeastern yearly meeting of the Religious Society of Friends, which you probably also know as the Quakers. She provides technical assistance to communities and governmental agencies on environmental and social justice issues. And as a Lake County resident, she will speak about environmental challenges in Lake County. Beverly, come on up. We're so happy to hear from you.
Thank you. I didn't start yet. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you today. And let's see, will you give me advance it one click, please? Back up a little bit. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to talk to you about environmental challenges, concerns, and threats, and specifically around Lake County. And this is just a data dump to prepare you for the workshop. I still think I'm in teaching mode, so I have to do this little piece. Next slide, please. This is an overview of what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes or so. I apologize for reading the slides to you, but I'm trying to be cognizant of people that may have vision challenges. So I tell you I'm going to talk about environmental challenges and concerns. Before that, I will do a land and water acknowledgement. I'm going to be focusing on population growth, some impacts around climate collapse, and some, in addition to those impacts, some opportunities that we may have to mitigate the adverse impacts and some opportunities for enhancement. Next slide, please. So this place is on the land of the Muskego, the Miccosukee, the Seminoles, and Temecula. And those are some ancient peoples who lived here. Some of them are still among us today. And I do this with looking to the land acknowledgement so that we can recognize the various communities that we share. And the water acknowledgement is that we're in the Lake Eustis watershed. The green spot is where the water quality is good. The red area is where there are problems, and the purple, the water condition is unknown. If you would like links to help you identify the land that you live on and also what watershed you live in, see me afterwards and I'll give you those. And I'll also add these to the website so that when it goes up on YouTube, the links will be right there. Next slide, please. So the environmental challenges, concerns and threats. Next slide, please. These are some selected characteristics of Lake County. The land area, both water and land. There are 2 nationally recognized protected areas. One is, of course, the Ocala National Forest, and some key socioeconomic characteristics that I'll share more with you later. The 2023 population estimate is 424,400, and what's that number? I can't read with my glasses on. I can't see them all. Okay. The median household income is about 66,000. That's a little bit less than the state median income, and about 10% of the persons in the county are estimated to be below the poverty level. And we have some infrastructure challenges in the environment, and I'll go into that a little bit. Next slide, please. I have the most recent population data I have is from 2023. Between 2010 and 2020, the state of Florida grew twice as fast as the US, and Lake County grew twice as fast as the state of Florida. But we're still growing. Just in the period between 2020 and 2023, it's estimated that Lake County grew more than 10%. So we're becoming much more densely populated, and this is a contributing factor. Next slide, please. More on population growth. These are some of the top what's known in the census as census designated places. These are town or city equivalents. And these are for those areas in Lake County that have populations greater than 5,000. And you can see that the change in population growth is kind of pretty much spread out. There's some good things and some mixed information in this slide. Most of the growth is happening within these already densely populated areas. And what's good about that is that on average, these areas grew about 42% between 2010 and 2020, and they grew about 15% between 2020 and 2023. So that's a lot of growth. And if you drive around Lake County, you know it's a lot of growth. Okay. Let's see. What else do I want to point out on here to you? Well, some of it, you can see there are other areas that these areas count for more than 50% of the population of the growth that's going on. So this is good. That's the good part about it. But there are some challenges that go along with it, with infrastructure. The other piece that is not in here that I'm keeping my eye on, and I'm not going to do very much with it right now because these are estimates. Every 10 years the census gets updated. In between, there's some estimates. I don't have 5 years of data from the 2020 census to give you more numbers, but I'm keeping my eye on the Four Corners area, and part of Four Corners is in Lake County, and I want to know what's going on with population growth there. Next slide, please. So this is a very busy slide, and I already can't read. There are 6 areas I want to point out to you. So give me 6 clicks, please. They have to do with the age, particularly female population, the number of estimated women. Women tend to live longer than men, so you tend to see a greater number of women in populations that it's growing in Lake County. I need to break that down more in terms of some demographics about, what age groups are women, but what I'm sure I'm gonna find is that older women. And Lake County is a little bit older than the average state age, okay? These have some, I'm pointing these out because these have some economic considerations to go along with it. Older people tend to be on fixed incomes. Older women tend to have lower incomes than older men. The concentration of persons of color is is lower than the state average, but it's around pretty much, especially for the those areas that are over 500, over 5,000. The concentration of minorities is about the same as the state, so people are pretty much spread out even. And then the bottom one is some of the data I broke down by percent of persons below the poverty level. That's a little bit higher for those areas over 5,000, those cities, census designated places. So there's some concentration of low-income households in the urbanized areas. Next slide, please. Okay, so challenges, threats, and concerns. Putting all of this together, I know it's a data dump. I kind of breeze through it. I tend to talk fast. I'm flailing around up here, but you can ask me questions later. The two photos that you have there, the top one is the flood threat. And this is from the National, I'm not going to do the acronym, National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. That's just, and the red in the middle is, of course, the St. Johns River. And this is just the flood threat. If you, there's a link to, I'll put a link to this site in there where you can go in and look at, there's several different water things that you can look at. I just gave you two. The one at the bottom is sea level rise. And that's with a foot of the current higher tide rise. What's important here is that 1 foot, some areas like on the West Coast, they've already seen it. And in the middle, again, when we think about sea level rise, it's not just the coast. The inland waterways also experience flooding and rising. So that's the Lake County piece. Next slide, please. So one click. Challenges. And another click, please. And one more. I did this for a specific reason, and you'll see when I get into the next 2 slides. So let's go to the next one. Some of you may have seen me talk about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. It's been around for over 3 years now, and it is producing. These are just some of the bullets, some of the talking points around, what's in the act. I can break this all down. I'm also teasing you because I'm happy to do these, to take each one of these slides and drill down and give a whole talk about them. So this is a teaser, but this is what's available. The challenge with this is that this funding is out there, it's producing already, we have to keep it going. If we're concerned about some of the social and environmental, this is what's going to help mitigate that. The next slide, please. The Inflation Reduction Act kind of piggybacks on that. One is the infrastructure, the other is kind of the operational dollars to have it done. Once we have the EV stations that are promised in the first act, the second act rolls, after it's rolled out, here's how we drive it. So again, same thing. It's important if we want those, the things that the Infrastructure Act provides, if we want those to take place, this act needs to be, we need to continue to have these funds available. The good part is that while this one has only been around for 2 years, money's rolling out. Some important things to think about this for Lake County is that it makes available smart, what they call it, climate smart agriculture and forestry is a big one for us to think about. There are some other pieces in it, but improving access to farmland and capital and helping farmers to keep farming. There's a whole, I didn't put it in here, but there is a farm bill that has not been reauthorized. So if you're looking for another piece of advocacy, think about the farm bill. It's very important, and it ties in with these two. So I'm not going to read all the bullets or talking points up here, but remember that, you know, there are healthcare provisions in here, and that's what's been lowering prescription drug costs. There's to be more of that. So, you know, if you want to get into advocacy, there's something up here for you to get involved in. Okay. And the next slide, please. That's it. Thank you. I know I kind of breezed through that, but I had a limited amount of time. How did I do?
Okay, that's great. Igor, do you have the microphone for questions in the audience? Igor will be fielding questions.
Yeah.
Of course he has the microphone. Yeah. Okay, there's a question over here.
Uh-huh.
There you go. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for your time this afternoon. I just need a confirmation on the $360 billion, which that goes to the infrastructure investment and the Inflation Reduction Act, and that is all for just Lake County?
No, it's not all for Lake County. I can give you a breakdown later for Lake County. There is a state breakdown, and one of the kind of push and pull things with population, a lot of these dollars are allocated based on population. And so if your population is growing, you're able to draw down more. That's pretty much. Not all of them work that way, but for the majority of them, they do. Okay, so what I can do is give you the state breakdown, and then we can do the county.
Isn't for the state of Florida either.
No,
It's
it's national. There are several pots of money for like each bullet. There's a pot of money that's associated with it, but there's only so much. I'm old school. Even though I had that really busy table up there, you're not supposed to have more than 7 talking points per slide. So I couldn't put everything up there. But as I said, it was a teaser. Now I would be happy to speak to any group that you about that breakdown.
Beverly, is the main takeaway that we are overpopulated?
The reality is that because of the geography, the environment of Lake County, it's the highest point in the state. In about 75 years, this will be an island. And so if we don't do something, and so there's a lot of in-migration. And that's where the growth, there's the natural population growth, which is a whole other subject that we can talk about, population growth. But then there is the in-migration that's occurring.
So you're giving us 75 years, right?
I'm not gonna say anything. Yes.
Wondering if you could give a few examples of the types of climate smart agricultural and farming changes that might be happening.
Yes. And there's an expert over here, John Einberg, who has, will share the Farm Bill with you. One of the things that we're advocating for is more regenerative farming. It outproduces, what we have now, and so the thing is to make, which is what we're happy about with the, infrastructure of the, Inflation Reduction Act, is that, that's a climate smart, thing that can be funded. And so and the funding should be used, and what we're looking for in the Farm Bill also is to help farmers transition from the way that they're doing into regenerative farming. Because it's, it's changing out, there's a bad year, it's gone. So, maybe 5 years time to transition over. So that's one. The other thing that goes with that is part of the Farm Bill. A lot of that goes to the SNAP program or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Sorry, I slipped one in there. What used to be known as the food stamps. So we want to incentivize people that for every dollar that's spent on fruits and vegetables, it really counts as $2. So those benefits go further. That's climate smart and health smart. And I'm out of time now.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'll be here all day. Thank you, again, for your attention.
Thank you so much. That was, gives a lot of things to think about, and track them down later if you have further questions or details. They've, Beverly and John both have a lot of good information for our causes. Next up is, I'm pleased to introduce Ryan Smart. Ryan is the Executive Director of the Florida Springs Council here in Florida, and he holds a master's degree in water policy and public administration from the University of Florida. In 2017, Ryan was honored as the University of Florida Bob Graham Center for Young Floridian of the Year for his environmental advocacy work. Ryan assumed the role as Florida Springs Council's first executive director in 2018, and after having served as the director of Florida Conservation Coalition and the president of 1,000 Friends of Florida. Ryan is very concerned about the health of the springs and is willing to do what is ever necessary through science, local governments, the legislatures, and the courts to save our springs. Recently, Ryan was one of the leaders in a quick, dramatic, and successful opposition to the plan to put golf courses and disc golf courses in our state parks. He will speak on advocacy strategies, and let's all welcome Ryan. We're very pleased to have him here today. Thank you.
How's that? That good? All right. I am Ryan Smart, Executive Director of the Florida Springs Council. I'm going to talk a little bit about environmental advocacy kind of through the Florida Springs Council lens today. So that's really focused at the state and somewhat local level. We don't really do federal stuff because all of Florida's water things are delegated to Florida, right? So the Clean Water Act, all of those things are delegated to Florida. So we pretty much deal with Florida. After a little bit about that, if I have time left, I'm going to give some of the advocacy tips that I learned from my first boss in the environmental community, former Governor and Senator Bob Graham. So next slide. So we'll start out talking about something I'm sure is very important here, which is local land use advocacy. Next slide. So the thing about local land use advocacy is it's really a numbers game, right? This is kind of the on the ground type of work. This is where yard signs are very effective. Showing up to public meetings are very effective. I think one of our biggest accomplishments in that regard is what's up on the board there, which was when Jim Gissy and Westgate developers wanted to build a hotel on the largest undeveloped parcel on the Rainbow River. When we got involved with this, we were brought in by local folks, local community members, Rainbow River conservation members. We were told this was a fight that could not be won. The city council there was 4-1, heavily in favor of approving the development. The developer was the most wealthy guy in town. We were told it was impossible. We managed to put over 500 yard signs out into that community where Florida Springs Council designed and purchased the yard signs, and we had local folks go door to door and visit almost every house in Dunellen to hand out those yard signs. And it got to the point where the mayor had to pass 50 of them between his house and Publix. His wife couldn't go to the local bridge club without being asked, why the heck are you going to ruin our community? We had one guy who went to the gas station on the main corner and he had a 6-foot by 8-foot sign with the developer's name on it, don't ruin Rainbow. And this really is all politics are local. So we did not focus on his, his company or anything like that. We focused on him, right? We focused very personally on the developer because at the very first meeting, he said, if y'all don't want this, I don't want to build it. Well, we took him at his word that if we could get enough support there to show that the community didn't want it, that he wouldn't build it. And sure enough, after a very intensive 3-month campaign, we did mailers to every single home in Dunellen. He actually came forward and withdrew the development. The local folks took that energy and they ran an anti-development slate, anti-irresponsible development slate for the city council, and all 4 of the city council members that were in favor of that development got kicked out in the next election. So that's really, I think, a great example of how local, Dunellen's a small town, Marion County, how local groups can work with our statewide groups, right? Because we can't have the bodies on the ground. Like the fact is that if your community wants something, we're not going to be able to come in and, represent the 10% against the 90. But if there's something that is really that the community does not want, we can come in, other groups can come in with the resources to help you, with the strategy, the funding, the comms, those kind of things. And at the same time as we fought that fight, we hired lawyers to look into the dock that the developer was building on his own personal house, right? So you can really have to look at every single angle to be able to apply pressure, because typically when we're going up against these things, we're the big underdogs, right? So you can't leave anything off the table if you want to be successful. Next slide. Another major win that was kind of lots of the environmental community came together, and you guys know about this one in Lake County, was in 2020, the Florida legislature. Every single one of them, Republican and Democrat, except one, voted in favor of running major new highways through our rural areas, right? This was called MCORS, or as we called it, the Roads to Ruin. Again, this was something that passed 119 to 1 in the House and 39 to 1 in the Senate. Again, we were told there was no way that you could stop this, but local groups, Sierra Club, Florida Springs Council, Native Plant Society, Florida Wildlife Federation, we began to organize and to churn people out to those Department of Transportation meetings. And I think one of the things that really helped us was that when you go into this meetings, 80% of the people there speaking against the toll roads were not driving Priuses with Biden stickers. They were driving F-350s with Trump flags. And I think that is something, much like the state park development, that we were able to have so much bipartisan support that the legislators realized, wow, we have really come across an idea that has ticked off everyone. We can't just say it's those crazy environmentalists, right? This is everyone does not want these toll roads going through their communities. I think you saw that same thing with the state parks, right? With the state parks, you'll notice that, legislators that have never been on my side on an environmental issue, we're issuing press releases about how much they opposed the state park developments, right? So being able to get that bipartisan support, and for us as conservationists to get outside of our comfort zone and reach people that we don't usually work with and appeal to them in a way that speaks to them, right? It may not be protecting water or protecting a forest, right? It might be quality of life in your small business. But, we need to build a big tent if we're going to be able to win these battles, because the developers are small. It's a very concentrated community, but they're incredibly powerful, right? Same thing up in Tallahassee with regulated industries. I'm a lobbyist up in Tallahassee, and I don't know that I've ever seen a person who wasn't paid get up at a committee meeting and speak in favor of an anti-environmental bill. I've seen thousands and thousands of people get up and speak in favor of the environment, right? We have to be able to show our elected officials that, because at the end of the day, they are elected officials, right? And they are concerned about re-election. And if they believe that their re-election is at stake, then we have a chance to make progress. Next slide. And then another one recently, they wanted to build one of those mega gas stations right on top of a cave, directly leading to Ocala Springs. This was another one where they needed a comprehensive plan amendment. Obviously, if you had a sinkhole there and the entire gas station went into the cave, it would have not only been the death of Ocala Springs and the Ocala River, but also the St. Mark's Estuary and a good portion of the Gulf of Mexico. We were able to churn 400 people out to a meeting in Crawfordville, which would kind of be like churning 400 people out. I think, probably even more ambitious than churning 400 people out in Lake County to a conservation meeting. There was not enough room for everybody. We were split out in the parking lot. It was 108 degrees. And eventually they called the meeting and they canceled it. We then went to the legislature and advocated for funding to get that parcel bought and permanently protected, which is also the same thing we did at Rainbow River. Not only did we just stop the development there, but we got the conservation easement put on that property so it can never, ever be developed. Because, one thing about trying to protect something is we have to win every time. Right? A developer only has to win once. So when we get these big wins and you're able to stop a development, it's important that you don't stop the progress there, that you go and make sure that that land is permanently protected from development. So we're not having to fight these fights year after year. All right, next slide. So the second type of advocacy we do is legal advocacy. We like to say this is our last resort, and it is, but more and more, this is the only resort we have when it comes to protecting the environment. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a minute about our Basin Management Action Plan Challenge. For those who don't know what Basin Management Action Plans, it's basically just water quality restoration plans. Y'all have one for the Wekiva and Rock here, right? So basically water quality in the Wekiva and Rock is well above what we call the total maximum daily load, which is the water quality goal. And the problem with that is that's where you get all the algae. So back in 2016, Florida legislature passed a law. One of the principal authors was David Simmons, who I respect immensely. It said, hey, we're going to designate 30 outstanding Florida springs. And by protecting these 30 outstanding Florida springs, we can protect the thousands and thousands of smaller springs around them. And the first thing they had to do was go and look at how many of these springs were impaired, how many had too much nitrogen. They found that 80%, so 24 out of 30 springs, had too much nitrogen. Which ones don't have too much nitrogen? Not surprisingly, they're the ones in the Ocala National Forest that are protected by all the conservation land around them. And they're the ones way out in the panhandle where you still don't have a lot of development in agriculture. Next slide. And that is the geographical area that covers the Basin Management Action Plan. So you can see we're not talking about a small part of Florida. I'm talking about a very large part of Florida, and everything that's in that bright green shade, those are the ones that Florida Springs Council members went to court to challenge because, next slide. The 2018 Basin Management Action Plans put forward by DEP did not follow the law. And in every case, they did not follow the law, shockingly, to benefit polluters. Right? So we've got all of this good stuff in law. I started working on that bill in 2013. We got it passed in 2016. So I spent the first 3 years of my professional environmental career working on getting that law passed. And I'll probably spend the rest of my environmental career trying to get that law enforced. So when these plans came out, they had some major deficiencies. And I'd say the biggest three, well, the first one is they didn't achieve the goal. So the legislature said in 20 years, you need to restore water quality. Well, there was nothing in the plans that would have actually restored water quality in 20 years. The second thing is they said, look, if you're going to set a goal for 20 years out, we need to be including the incoming pollution. And you all in Lake County, after seeing that presentation, will find this very funny. DEP assumed there would be zero population growth in Florida over the next 20 years. They put that as a credible thing to the courts on a plan they adopted. We don't think anyone's going to move to Florida. And then the third thing was they refused to assign responsibility, right? It's called allocations, but basically the law says you have to tell each type of polluter, each local government, each non-point source of pollution, how much they're responsible for. Because if we don't give folks goals, right, they're never going to achieve them. So DEP did none of those things. So the Florida Springs Council members, about 12 of our members funded and organized by us, took DEP to court in 2018. Next slide. And after a 4-year legal battle, we won at the First District Court of Appeals. So the First District Court of Appeals ruled that DEP had violated the law by not assigning those pollution reductions to various types of polluters. Next slide. So this is what happened. For the Santa Fe River, it's kind of hard to see, but basically that first black dot is where we started. If you can see the white dot, where there's like some language you probably can't read, that is where DEP promised we would be in 2023. And that black dot at the top is where we actually are. So while we should have had pollution reduced by 30%, we actually saw it increase by 20% after DEP adopted these plans. Next slide. And here's Wekiva Rock, same thing, right? The black dot on the far left is where we started. That white dot is where we should have been in 2023, and that black dot up there, things have actually gotten worse, right? So we didn't just go to court because we were like, hey, let's mess with DEP. You didn't follow the letter of the law. We said we went to court because we would not reach water quality goals. And here we are 5 years later, and we're worse off than where we started. So now DEP, because of our court case, they have to come up with new basin management action plans by July 1st, 2025. And they're in the process of doing that now. They actually have been having meetings on Wekiva and Rock Springs. They've been through 2 of those meetings so far. Next slide. So the good news is we have allocations. So now every local government, every source of non-point pollution in the Wekiva Spring Shed has a goal that they have to meet within 5 years and then within 13 years in order to achieve the water quality goal. The bad news is DEP is still assuming no one is going to move to Florida over the next 20 years. And while we have these numbers, there's no enforcement. There's not even the thought of enforcement, right? So it's kind of like we now, before we had roads that didn't have speed limits, so everyone drove as fast as they wanted. Well, now we have speed limits, but no cops, right? So some people are going to say, hey, I want to do the right thing. The law says I got to drive 70, I'm going to drive 70, right? But a lot of people, if they know there aren't cops, are going to go 80, 90, or whatever they want to go, right? So unfortunately, we're probably going to have to end up back in court with the Department of Environmental Protection yet again to force them to do the thing that they were told in 2016 by the legislature to do. And the whole point is we don't want to see that graph that I showed you before continue to go up, right? At some point, we need those numbers to start going down. I mean, heck, we at least need them to level off. Right, but you have a plan, you have a law, everyone worked really hard to do it. David Simmons was involved in it, Alan Hayes was a supporter of it. I mean, this wasn't a piece, it was signed into law by Rick Scott. This was not a piece of radical, liberal legislation. This was a consensus bill. And what's happened is there was a lot of horse trading, a lot of sausage making. All the things that we gave to industry, that we gave to agriculture, that we gave to developers, those things have all been done. All the things that were supposed to be for the environment, all those things have simply been ignored. So this is why we have to go to court, because you just basically, even when you get good legislation, we can't get the agencies to follow the law and implement it. Next slide. And finally, legislative advocacy. So I work as a lobbyist in Tallahassee for the 60 days that the legislature is in session. I think one of the craziest things about Florida is we have the same legislative calendar as South Dakota. When we have about 100 times more people. So if you're wondering why it seems like nothing ever gets done in Florida, it's because we're trying to govern an entire state of 21 million people in 60 days. And that's a very hard thing to do. Next slide. So I'm just one guy, to be honest. I run the environmental lobby corps in Florida. There's about 30 environmental lobbyists. We're going up against an army of hundreds of regulated industry lobbyists, right? And we do not have the giant checks. We don't get invited to the cool parties, right? We're not flying politicians around on our private airplanes because we're environmentalists. But what we do have is the public support. The one thing that we can do that the other side can't is show them that we have their voters, right? The voters stand with us. And you see this again and again, right? The last election that we just had, overall throughout the state and the country, you can see the conservative policies did very, very well. So you would think maybe environmental stuff wouldn't, but in Florida, being environmental really isn't a political divide. The fact is most of the people up in Tallahassee of either party are very bad on the environment. And some of the very best people I work with in Tallahassee on environmental issues are conservatives. So the whole idea there's a political divide on the environment, there really isn't one. It's basically everyone is anti-environmental except a handful of folks that are pro-environmental. But the way we can change that is by turning out the public. Right. So, I've never walked into a legislator's office and said, hey, here's my great argument. And they've gone, hey, Ryan, you're right. You've convinced me. I just should have thought of that. But many, many times we've generated thousands of emails and thousands of phone calls. And I've gotten a call from the legislator staff. Okay, you win. Shut off the emails, shut off the phone calls. A lot of these guys have 1 or 2 staff members, right? They have one single email account. You generate 5,000 emails in an hour, 400 calls in a day. Nothing else is happening in their office. And they're never getting those calls from the other side, right? They're never getting people showing up to Tallahassee to tell them, hey, we need more pollution. We need more development, right? It's only the paid lobbyists that are doing that. So when we can channel all that energy on issues, we really can be effective. Last year, there was a bill that would have stopped environmental lawsuits in Florida. We were able to stop that through a bunch of phone calls and by the threat of legal action. And because my group goes to court, one of the nice things is we don't always have to. Because the fact that when I go in and say we're going to sue you, that is a real threat. And if they think, well, these guys also win, then sometimes that's enough to get it done. Another bill was a bill that would have preempted any local government regulations on plastics, including in state parks. Right, so like if you want to go on Juniper Run, or if you want to go on the Ichitucky, you can't bring plastic water bottles. They wanted to remove that regulation, right? So we were able to generate enough phone calls and emails, bring a couple dozen people up to Tallahassee, that we were able to influence one vote, one senator, one conservative senator to vote against her party, which killed that bill for the year, right? But it wasn't because of me and my great arguments. It was because we were able to show that there was so much disapproval around the state of that policy. Next slide. We've done a whole bunch of other stuff that same way. Next slide. Oh, I guess it's not there. Okay, so my main point here is that whatever environmental group you're a part of, hopefully during legislative session, you're getting an email that says, hey, we need your help in the legislature. And, you know, when I was in my old career, I kind of just thought they don't actually need my help. They're trying to collect my information, or they're asking me for money, or whatever it is. We really do need your help. Right, and we'll have a slide up at the end, but at Florida Springs Council, you can become a member of the Florida Springs Council for free. I think we're the only nonprofits in the state where you don't have to pay anything to be a member. And what I ask of you is that when you get the emails during session, you take a couple minutes to actually send an email to your legislator or make a phone call, because that's the only way that I'm going to be able to stop bad laws from going into place, or to get some good laws passed, to get more money for land conservation, which I know is important to y'all, get more money for springs and water quality protection. All of those things is when we all come together. You know, I go and I do these meetings in the hope that we can get 5 or 10 people to join up as free members. And, you know, when I go and put out that alert, when I'm logging up in Tallahassee, you know, we've gone from being able to generate 300 emails to 3,000 emails to 10,000 emails. You know, there's a point where we'll be able to win all the time if we can hit a critical mass. You know, you can actually hear legislators say it from the dais. I got 7,000 calls as opposed to this bill and 0 in favor of it. I'm not voting for it, right? So that really is the key thing that we can do, is to let your elected officials know that you care and you're watching and you're engaged. And when it comes election time, yeah, you're going to remember. And it's especially effective when those are coming from their constituents, right? When they're not just coming from me, but when they're coming from you all who they need to vote for them. All right, so how much time do I have?
Time for questions.
Time for questions. All right.
Igor.
Igor. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, thank you, Ryan. I never did that, ever. Never made a phone call, never wrote an email. But it does work. It's actually very easy. Everybody here can do it. If you call at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know who answers? Nobody. You get to leave a voicemail, have a little script, why you called, where you live, or that you're in their district, leave a message with your name, phone number, and hang up and call somebody else. You can do 7 of them in 10 minutes. It is the easiest thing I've ever done, except for sending emails. Because I can write a short script, customize each person a little bit for what their specialty is and what their expertise, where they live is, and send 7 emails in 15 minutes. And you're right, I cannot believe I heard members of the committees saying, I got 4,000 emails. There's no way I can vote for this. It actually happens. He's not making it up. Thank you so much. I stole the idea from you. I've used it with my teams here. And All praise you.
Thank you. Yeah. I didn't invent email, by the way. And I will say that if you join Florida Springs Council, we pay for one of them fancy advocacy systems. We pay quite a bit for it. And, if you go on and put in your address, we'll give you the phone number, the email address, we'll give you a draft script, we'll give you all of that information.
Hello, thank you. So taking a look at this slide here, we talked about you didn't talk about it, but I read about it. So it says determine the public opinion, not something that you did talk about, being able to get people to speak up. How would you recommend people doing that, especially in areas that maybe they don't have an opinion on, right? You talked about like calling them and saying we need your help, but they don't really necessarily care about or are able to understand how it's relevant to them. So what are some tips and things that you've done along the way to get people to even engage in the conversation or to encourage them that this is something that they should care about?
Right. I mean, in my experience, Floridians care about the environment, right? You're never going to see an anti-environmental politician on their campaign. They're 90% of them when they get to Tallahassee become anti-environmental, right? But the most pro-development politician is campaigning on the environment. When you look at last Tuesday, all 4 land conservation initiatives, all 4 of which were in conservative counties, all passed with more than 65% of the vote. So I think it's really mostly about outreach, more than having to convince people that they should care about the environment. It's making them aware that there's something they can do to protect the environment. And if we can just make enough people aware of it, then we can hit those critical numbers.
Hey, hello, Ryan, over here. You showed the DEP graph there and the pollution levels where it got higher. What's the driving force? What's the largest thing that's the big item? What's driving pollution? And how do you measure that? What's the measuring? Is it nitrates or what is it?
Yeah, so the pollution of concern for springs is nitrogen. That's the one that is growing and causing the algae. So, and that's the one that we have rules for. It depends on the basin. Statewide for springs, it's agriculture, and it's not even close. Agriculture in the last round of BMAPs was responsible for more pollution than everything else combined. Come down here, it's not agriculture. You come down here, it's septic tanks and urban fertilizer, right? So it really is basin dependent. But you take Silver, Rainbow, Santa Fe, and Sewanee, the nitrogen going into those 4 basins is like 10 times as large as the nitrogen going into all the other springs combined. So typically our urban springs, fertilizer and septic, are rural springs. And I know what's rural and what's urban, but I would consider you all to be more on the urban side of things here in Central Florida than Santa Fe and Sewanee counties, where you have, you have towns here that have the population of all of Sewanee County, right? But it is agriculture, and that's the hardest one to address. Septic's hard because it's so expensive. We need to essentially, if you believe the numbers come out by DEP, we need to remove every single septic tank in the Wekiva Basin. Every single one, right? That's going to be very expensive, but we know how to do it. When it comes to agriculture, the problems are, it's almost impossible to figure out how to have agriculture that is economically viable and isn't going to destroy our springs.
Thank you for your presentation this afternoon. A comment first in regards to the nitrates. I was just up in Blue Springs, and it dawned on me with all the manatees in there and all the waste they must contribute as far as body waste, and if that could possibly be, it's not.
I mean, you're talking about millions of people versus hundreds of manatees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would be interesting to see.
it wouldn't even register.
It
Wouldn't even register.
Okay, the other, you brought it up, the ballot issue, because it passed in Lake County here, the land use, it was described as to purchase land and clean water, and they basically just threw everything from the kitchen sink in there. And I get my property tax statement on the 7th, we voted on the 4th, and the land use thing, they already have it on my property tax thing, so it passed. Yes, what you're telling me. So my concern is when there is such a general initiative on the ballot to purchase land, I mean, like, well, where's the land and what is it going, specifics need to be made. For all we know, our government could be selling it to China or a foreign entity. I mean, why are we paying, why that was passed supposedly like 80% to 20% Lake County on such a generalized statement, I'm like, what the heck?
The whole thing's on our
So
website.
that's it.
A generalized statement isn't valid.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, except for developers have been trying to strip this, but when you purchase land, it's protected permanently. So it couldn't be sold to China or a developer or anyone else. Like it's called perpetual conservation. So, you know, sometimes like with Split Oak, the developers have managed to corrupt government to the point where they've been able to override those things for things like roads and other things that are like eminent domain issues. But the land, you know, will be protected and you have so much important watershed, right? Like, I mean, the thing about the area up here is, you know, you want to protect a tree, you put a fence around it. You want to protect the mountain so people can't climb it. You want to protect water, you have to protect the whole basin, right? And the only way to do that is to set land aside. Because anything you put on land, it stops having its environmental benefits and it becomes a negative. And we're just going to see those numbers, right, go up and up and up. So you know, could there always be more specific? Sure. But what I really liked about it was we are protecting land to protect water. We don't protect land for the sake of having forests. We protect land because those forests are what clean our water and allow for the other development. The more you protect, the more you can develop. I mean, you know, if you care about the environment, right? If you don't care about the environment, develop all you want. But if you care about the environment, and the smart people say we need about 50%. We need to put about 50% of our land to the side in natural conditions so that we can live on the other 50% if we want not to have pristine environment, but a good quality of life.
Ron, will you just take a second to talk about why the manatees are not contributing to the pollution?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying they're not, I'm saying you couldn't measure it. Like, yes, they poop, the poop has nitrogen.
But they're eating in the system, they're taking nutrients and just recycling, whereas we're putting nutrients into the system.
Right, I mean, yeah, they also eat other places, I agree. The other thing is the manatees have always been there, you know, it's kind of for them, we could be anywhere, but you know, that one's a real good. It's a good point, but you know, the manatees, there's just not enough of them. Unlike cows, way too many cows, not enough sea cows.
But it's so low, I mean, like, it would be interesting when they're in such a small space for a long period of time. What that does just in that lives, I don't know.
Right. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds of nitrogen per day that we're causing. Hundreds of thousands of pounds per day.
And it goes north, right?
No.
No.
No, well, you're talking Volusia Blue, not here, right? Yeah, the Volusia Blue is a spring shed, right? Water goes down. So there's a spring shed all around Volusia Blue and everything in that spring shed goes into Volusia Blue, right? But I can promise you the manatees are not creating hundreds of thousands of pounds of nitrogen a day. You know, that's one of those like, you know, what's the solution? We're gonna get rid of the manatees? Like, no, we need to clean up our act, right? Like if this is an us problem, I promise you, not a manatee problem.
Actually, we were talking about, the DEP now needs to develop new basin management plans and they're holding these meetings. And then I'm particularly interested in the Wekiva Basin and is there a place for the residents, the citizens to sit in on some of these meetings? And if so,
yeah, and I'll tell you what to do. You need to talk to the gentleman right there in the blue and white shirt, Mike Clyburn with Friends of Wekiva River. He is on my board member and Friends of Wekiva River is one of the best local springs groups and one of the best local environmental groups of the whole state. They have an amazing group of real experts that have been winning victories for the Wekiva for a long time. So get with Mike and that is the way to get involved.
One more?
Coming off whenever you want.
One more. Very good.
I was wondering if, any organizations are tracking the impacts of degraded water quality on wildlife.
Oh, I mean, you know, yes, for sure. I mean, especially like manatees, that's kind of the species that everybody looks to. I care a lot about things like the Ichetucknee silt snail and a lot of these little things that exist in like one cave that could go away. In general, just like, big picture, what happens with the algae is it gets rid of the seagrass, right? And the seagrass are the trees of the springs. So it's kind of like you have a forest, you get rid of all the trees, you can still have a pretty piece of land, but it has no ecological value, right? A spring system without those seagrasses doesn't, there's no place for the turtles, the fish, the manatees, the manatees are the big federally protected one there where we focus on, but the entire ecosystem, it's just like clear cutting a forest when you have that algae come in and get rid of the seagrasses. So, one thing is like when you see a pretty picture of a spring, if it doesn't have a bunch of waving seagrass, or if it has these like floating clouds of things, you might be like, oh, that's pretty. I promise you it's not. Right? It's really not, right? We need to see that bright, glowing seagrass. Like that is the picture of a healthy spring. Thank you all so much.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. I hope that we're all inspired to pay attention to what's going on with these environmental laws on a statewide level. That is where we really have the opportunity to make impact. I personally was inspired to become environmentally active after I went back to Juniper Springs after having been away from the state for 20 years. And I remember swimming in Juniper and the eels in the eelgrass, and it was beautiful. And now it's kind of like this muddy looking sand. And the whole place looks beautiful. And if you haven't been there before, you might think it's beautiful. But all I can see is the water and the sand and no seagrass. That's all going on all over the state. So be inspired by that. All right. Thank you again. All right, up next, we have a Lake County success story of a group of citizens who got together and advocated against a subdivision that was planned to go into one of our rural protection areas. Kathleen, you want to come up? Kathleen is a PhD in educational leadership with a doctoral minor in statistics and statistics and research, and served for 30 years as a teacher, school administrator, and directing of planning, evaluation, and accountability in the Lake County schools. Kathleen also served as the operations director for Lake County Solid Waste Department for 5 years. More recently, she was one of the leading advocates for Stop Grand Oaks. Kathleen will share how that advocacy resulted in success. Kathleen, thank you.
Good afternoon. I know I stand between you and break, so I'm going to try to read really fast. But thank you for inviting me to represent our rural community and share some of our efforts to stop the annexation and rezoning of the beautiful Grand Oaks property in Wearsdale. We hope our story gives advocacy groups hope and encouragement, regardless of your circumstances. To begin, I would like to acknowledge a few things. First, we know most of you are probably much more experienced with advocacy than we were. We recognize our situation with development had some very unique characteristics. We were blessed with a team of amazing people. 2 of them are here today. And we had a full year to figure out what we were going to do to execute a successful plan. While we totally embrace this win for our community, we do realize the developer can and most likely will reapply in the future. And we are also aware the developer filed an appeal on the final allowable day to dispute the denial of the proposed annexation. With that, for those of you who are not familiar with the Grand Oaks, it's an equestrian resort comprised of 20 parcels for a total of 350 acres, and it is not contiguous to Lady Lake. Over half of the property is in the Emeralda Marsh RPA. The Grand Oaks is a truly magical place with hundreds of majestic trees, rolling hills, and a selection of wildlife that includes some protected species. It began as a carriage museum and a training facility and has been loved by many throughout the world. Many people board their horses at Grand Oaks, and many local residents pay an annual fee to ride their horses on the property. Many of us bought our property and homes in this area to live next door or near the Grand Oaks, and many of us were longtime or lifelong residents. There are many equestrian events and competitions on the property, in addition to other types of activities, including a cowboy church, yoga, healing energy, and spiritual events. The original owner and creator was Gloria Austin. She was an esteemed carriage driver who was loved and respected throughout the world. All of these reasons motivated many people to support the efforts to stop this annexation and development. The Grand Oaks is currently owned by Tom Golisano, a multi-billionaire, Successful businessman, former two-time candidate for the governor of New York, and a prolific philanthropist. Our group's story began in October of 2023 with an article published in the Village News about a Lady Lake Commission workshop for a plan to annex and rezone the Grand Oaks into a PUD. The plan included 795 manufactured homes, which later increased to 895 homes, to create affordable housing for families, commercial space, an outdoor entertainment theater, a grocery store, a solar farm, a community farm, and much more. It was basically a proposal for a small city in the middle of all rural property. It was shocking, to say the least. And because we live in a rural area, very few of us knew one another before this began. Thus, our initiative began with individuals responding to the news. Some immediately began writing letters to commissioners. Some began making public records requests. Some neighbors immediately organized a meeting to discuss what we should do to oppose the annexation and rezoning. Information began to get posted on existing and social media sites. A few of us showed up at the next town commission meeting to provide public input regarding the proposed conceptual plan, even though it was not on the agenda. Neighbors began meeting one another, groups started forming, and initiatives started to happen. One local resident immediately created the stopgrandoaks.com website. He also created a variety of yard signs, like Ryan mentioned, that quickly began appearing throughout our community. After attending a planning and zoning meeting, 3 of our neighbors, including an attorney, created the community surrounding Grand Oaks Facebook group. In less than 2 months, a meeting was held to combine the separate groups that had formed. Our first joint meeting was literally held in a driveway in the rain. Our second meeting was held in a barn and pasture, and we again sat through the rain. Our meetings became synonymous with rain, and we eventually found an indoor venue. We established an organizational chart that included work groups with leads who were knowledgeable about areas of concern. We scheduled monthly meetings for our large group and for our group leaders. Tim Gant, who is the leader of Marion County's Save Our Rural Area, attended one of our meetings to speak to our group. When asked about the top 3 things on which we should focus, he provided the following advice: raise money and get an attorney, read and know the town and county growth planning documents, get more people, and show your spirit. 2 members of our group took the lead in establishing relationships with media. We gained instant coverage with several news stations and online publications. This generated a lot of attention and support. We did, however, get scolded at one point because a news article was upsetting to the town commission. Our team quickly learned to ask to review articles and quotes before they were published. Numerous organizations were researched to seek information about fighting proposed annexations and developments. The websites of these groups provided excellent information, and I must say the Lake County Conservation Council was particularly responsive when we had questions. An email list was created to keep the group informed in a more secure manner through weekly updates. We were very cautious about sharing information on social media about the strategies we were going to use. Some of us attended all of the Lady Lake Commission and Planning and Zoning meetings. In the beginning months, we had 3 or 4 speakers assigned to address specific areas of concern. They included the typical topics such as schools, roads, traffic, environment, water, crime, policy-related issues, wildlife issues, etc. We were blessed with members who had experience or expertise in critical areas. One member previously led school redistricting committees in Broward County as a parent and was very familiar with school concurrency. She was our school expert. Another member, a veterinarian, horse owner, and equestrian, had recently purchased her home and property from the Grand Oaks. She served as an expert regarding several areas. She informed the commission about the effects of losing rural areas and lifestyle and the decline it had on large animal veterinarians. She also provided key data regarding shortages in local healthcare providers. Finally, she shared her story about purchasing her property from Grand Oaks after being assured the Grand Oaks was not going to sell or rezone for development. The day after she closed on her property, the Grand Oaks listed the resort to sell it and then later decided to develop it. We were also fortunate to have the president of the National Wild Turkey Foundation in our group. She spoke about the conservation of Osceola turkeys, their presence at the Grand Oaks, and their declining habitat. Many times we had bonus people attend meetings to provide public input that was not planned by our group. We chose to attend all meetings because we had no idea when the developer would submit an application, and we wanted to take ample time to address all of our concerns. After several months, we limited our public input and just attended meetings to listen and show our presence. Several Lady Lake residents also began attending meetings to express concerns about proposed developments, and this was very helpful. Stop Grand Oaks t-shirts were designed with input from the group. 2 of our members had lots of experience with t-shirt orders at the local elementary school. Red was our color, of course, and the shirts instantly sent a message of unity. Several of us met with county commissioners. 2 of us met with the chairman of the county commission months before the application was filed. The county attorney, executive director of economic development, and director of growth planning were also present in the meeting. The purpose of our meeting was to explore the possibility of the county contesting the annexation of non-contiguous rural property using the ISBA, the Interlocal Service Boundary Agreement. During the meeting, a video was sent to my fellow team members' phone showing the Grand Oaks developer moving 3 manufactured homes onto the Grand Oaks property. They had no permits and they had not yet filed an application. We shared the video with the chairman, who was sitting right next to us, who immediately directed his staff to get code enforcement involved. We didn't even have to make a phone call to report that situation. To generate attention for rural lifestyles in rural areas, one of our leaders organized an awareness ride. Cotham's Farm generously provided their sod farm for our starting and ending points. They also provided bathroom access and allowed us to serve lunch to all of the participants at the conclusion of the ride. We established a patriotic theme of red, white, and blue. Approximately 30 horses and riders, a hay wagon full of people, all-terrain vehicles, walkers, and runners participated in the awareness ride. The runners and the walkers served a vital role to stop and direct traffic during the ride. Awards were presented for a variety of fun categories. It was a huge success. Group bonds were strengthened, and we received more media attention. We were lucky to have a retired public works director and certified arborist from Miami Springs in our group. He immediately began letter writing campaigns to town commissioners to express his opposition. He also began sending letters to inform residents in strategically identified communities about the proposed development. You would be amazed at how many people had no idea what was going on just a mile down the road. When official notices for the annexation and rezoning hearings were mailed by the town to those within only 150 feet of the Grand Oaks, we also sent letters to the same group with much more detailed information about the annexation and rezoning, and we included the maps of the concept plan. We provided information about hearing dates and email addresses to which objections could be sent. Public records requests were streamlined, so only one request was being made to the Director of Planning. The documents were then disseminated to our group members. The Lake staff was exemplary in communicating and responding to our questions and requests. We established a very respectful and professional relationship with the Director of Planning, and he began providing documents as soon as they were received. 2 of our members created cards with critical information, including public hearing dates and addresses to send letters of objection. They then did door-to-door campaigns in targeted neighborhoods to distribute the cards and talk to the people. Because most of the people in our group had never attended public meetings, we spent some time training people on meeting behavior and procedures. We wanted to make sure people were respectful to the elected officials and to their meetings. Since the Floyan community is very close to the Grand Oaks, we established a relationship with the residents and the pilots. The pilots presented critical information in the public hearings to inform the commissioners that the proposed manufactured homes were in the direct FAA approved and required landing and takeoff patterns. Low flying planes in the most critical times of safety concern, noise complaints that often arise from new residents that move in, and potential danger posed to pilots by residents on the ground, such as shining laser lights, were all shared with the commission. These pilots were amazing expert witnesses. It was not surprising that the rebuttal from the developer's attorney regarding these very real concerns was, planes fly over homes all the time. In the hearing, we provided packets of information that included slides comparing the latest aerials of Grand Oaks property contrasted with the proposed development. Our purpose was to show the drastic changes that would take place with trees, the RPA area, topography, and flood zone. For instance, a comparison of heavily treed to complete manufactured homes was very compelling. We also demonstrated the inaccuracy of the tree study with aerial views, and we asked questions about proposed dwelling units that were not shown in the conceptual plan. Where were they going to go? In the proposed 3-story building as apartments? Nobody knew. In addition, those fighting to protect the Emerald Marsh provided excellent input. Valid concerns about our local roads were presented along with information regarding the lack of plans or the budget the county had to upgrade the roads for all of the additional traffic. As for an attorney, it took us a full 7 months to find an attorney who was willing to represent us. 7 people agreed to share the cost of the attorney, and we had 2 additional people who provided donations. Our group was then again blessed with the perfect attorney who was excited to join our team. Allison Yurka was an absolute rock star, and we will be forever grateful for her work and representation. In addition to hiring an attorney, 3 people committed funds to hire a certified planner to review the actual annexation and rezoning application, and a civil engineer to review the wastewater treatment reports and projections. We believe the information provided by all 3 of these professionals was crucial to support our cause to deny the annexation. Everyone in our group played a role of great importance. Some were only able to wear red and come to the hearings. We've already heard how critical that is. We really had that critical need, and our people showed up. Some were unable to attend meetings or hearings, but their prayers and their good intentions were heard. There were also people who worked quietly in the background and shared important information that drove our plans and decisions. There's nothing like getting a message in the middle of the night from one of these behind-the-scenes people to ignite a whole new initiative to stop the annexation. There were times when we lost our focus and we had to redirect our efforts. There were times when people were tired and some thought it was a done deal and we didn't have a chance against a billionaire. All it took was, we're going to win this, right? To restore that trust, faith, and motivation that we were going to succeed. I'm extremely proud of our rural community and this entire initiative. Together, we worked really hard to achieve success. And finally, in pro-development times, with lots of pressure on elected officials, we were incredibly thankful for the Lady Lake Commissioners having the courage, the requested annexation, to deny the requested annexation in the best interests of Lady Lake. They are heroes and hopefully will be emulated by other elected officials. So thank you very much for listening to this today, and we hope it takes some help. Thank you. Any questions?
Yurko? Is that who?
Yes, that's correct.
From Orlando, right?
Yes, sir.
I know.
She's amazing. We just absolutely loved her.
How long did all this take?
We were really, really blessed with an entire year from the time the workshop was held in October of 2023, and then the public hearing in front of the city commission or the town commission was on September 16th, 2024. So we were really lucky. Most people have a 2-week notice. I don't even know how they have time to prepare to respond to anything. It's a total injustice to the nearby property owners.
Between planning and legal fees, how much did that cost?
I haven't added up exactly, but it was right around $40,000.
Good. Yes. So billionaire
Billionaire,
If
5.6 billion plus some.
billionaire might have an opportunity to work with people who want to have housing that's affordable to people and it's environmentally sound and such as that. And I'm not for development, but what in the United States, housing has become so expensive. Somehow, that guy, he filed the last day to challenge this, right?
His attorneys did.
His attorneys,
Well, actually, it was the developer's attorney.
the developers.
Yes,
I
sir.
know there's a talk today, a workshop on urban development, but ultimately people will continue to move to Florida, people need housing and such as that. Somehow, that guy, he has resources, but if he could become more of a environmentally, forward-thinking person, sometimes cooperation, if we could foster more cooperation, great good could come out of it.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, I'm the former planning director for Ontario County, New York, which is where Tom Dallas now lives and where his business is, where he owns his lakefront Canandaigua Lake house. And he bought an 800-acre wetland on the Irondequoit Creek and denuded 70% of the forest to build his flood elevated mansion and gatehouse, about a half mile from my old house.
I didn't know anything about it.
Tom is a really nice guy. He's a small time accountant who had an idea early in the tech age to create paychecks. And that's where his money comes from. So he's very stretched in a lot of other things. And as much as I appreciate your comment, I don't think he's the guy that's going to do it for us.
Was this proposed, mobile home park affordable housing?
Not the way we calculated everything. The developers that were proposing this manufactured home park were going to finance the homes. They had their own financing company. They were going to provide the insurance because you can't get insurance on a mobile home unless you own the land that it's sitting on. And then they were going to charge a lot rent. And when we ran the numbers and projected how much it was going to cost people about $3,500 a month to get into one of these manufactured homes.
Thank you so much. It was very inspiring story.